Yeah, so we just wanted to give, to get the discussion started, a brief overview of what preprints are and how they might be used. Fair warning, I took all of this information from the NIH training on preprints. They have actually a training that's available, and I have the link on the last slide, so you can go through it yourself. But yeah, thank you, NIH, for having that available. So yeah. Let me see if I can figure out how to advance the slide. Okay. So what is a preprint? So preprints are complete drafts of scientific documents. So they're meant to be, a completed draft, they are importantly before peer review, right? So this kind of highlights the process by which people might use a preprint. So we oftentimes will post a preprint to a preprint server ahead of submitting it to a journal. And then in the journals where it undergoes peer review, and then you have your comments with reviewers, and then hopefully it's accepted, right? And so Preprints are, useful. They're because they can be made available to the public at no cost. So they can, be a way to distribute information to the research community. But also a lot of preprint servers have a function where people in the community can provide feedback. So it's a way to get feedback too sometimes. And so again, this preprint can be shared either before it's submitted to a research journal or at the same time. Yeah, so this is kind of overall what a preprint is. So again, preprints are not peer-reviewed, but posting a preprint to a preprint server can often be part of the publication process. And uh, and preprints are also now a lot of the preprints through like bioRxiv, medRxiv, etc., have DOIs and they're indexed on NCBI. And preprints can be cited. But if you go on NCBI and you look at a preprint, they're going to be flagged with a warning that they're not peer reviewed. So that's just something to keep in mind, especially if you choose to cite a preprint. And we've had our preprint cited before, and there's debate on whether that can, takes away from the citations of your actual publication, but that's something we can talk about. But they can be cited because they are indexed on NCBI and have DOIs. And so where can I preprint? So there's actually a lot of options now and places to preprint. It used to be, back in 2013 is when bioRxiv started. And so that, at that time, that was really one of the only preprint servers that was available. And now there's a bunch more that are very like field specific. There's also rArchive, which is a very general repository. And so bioRxiv is for biology research papers and for really non-clinical papers. And then there are all these other field-specific ones like chemArchive for more chemistry-focused papers, medRxiv for clinical studies, etc. There are also preprints now that are built into preprinting services that are built into the journal submission process. So both Springer Nature and Wiley actually have the option to preprint your article when you're submitting it to be peer reviewed at one of their journals. And so that's part of the submitting workflow is choosing whether or not you would want it to be preprinted via their service. And so this, I think, has pros and cons, which we can discuss. And there are also there are many other, I think, society journals that also have some of these pre-printing capabilities too. So that's something to keep out for. There are the general repositories like bioRxiv, chemArchive, medRxiv, and then there are these ones that are tied to the publisher. Okay, so we can, so these are some of the benefits and challenges of using preprints that the NIH has, really pointed out on their training and their website. So benefits, as a user. So, of course, they have benefits not just to the poster, but also to the users, to the general scientific community. It allows us to access, timely research. If it's medically associated in an emergency response, preprints became really big during the COVID-19 pandemic, and that's when their use was expanded a lot, and they were starting to be indexed on NCBI, et cetera, because there was all this research coming out very quickly during that time. And then, of course, they help us to actively participate in open science practices, right? We're posting our research right out there, and they're fully accessible for everybody without having to pay. And then again, we can use them to rapidly retrieve high quality information. We hope again it's not peer reviewed. As a preprint creator, of course, there are a lot of benefits too. It increases the visibility of your research. You're able to preprint things without having to wait for the very long journal review process, which can take a year or two. It helps you again to directly contribute to the open body of science scholarship. And hopefully the idea behind a lot of these preprints was also to have feedback be given. And I don't know if that's been taken hold of so far. But the idea is it can encourage critical engagement with your research from peers, before maybe you would submit it for peer review. There are challenges, right? So there's just a ton of preprints out there. A lot of preprints, apparently might not all get published, right? There's a need for increased caution when using information because again, they have not been peer reviewed. So there's no guarantee that they're rigorous. But I think that can also be said for some things that are peer reviewed. In general, you have to really be careful when evaluating the information that you see in those. And again, it doesn't have as much of an impact as an author. For your research, you don't get as much recognition or accolades for tenure process, for example, with having preprints as opposed to having an actual publication. But another benefit to them is that the NIH encourages the use of these interim research products, as they call them, preprints, to speed this dissemination of our work that's funded by the NIH. And so we can actually, as NIH-funded investigators, claim preprints as products during our RPPRs or NIH award required reports. And so that's a real benefit, I think. It's a way to say, hey, I've actually done something on this grant. It's just, still in the peer review process. But yeah, that's all I had on that. And here's the link. I don't know if Dr. Hayward would like to say anything.
Sorry, I was talking into space there because thanks, Nicole. That was I think a very nice summary. I mean, I'm not sure I have much to add except that I came to this sort of fairly late in my career. I mean, I didn't really hear about preprints probably until I think you said 2013, and that's pretty much around the date that I was thinking. It was before I moved here. I was still at Vandy, and a colleague, Magda Grabowska, who I know a number of you know, her sister is a physicist, and her sister was wondering why biologists weren't doing preprints because the physicists had been doing them for 20 years at that point. And it sort of generated a bunch of discussion amongst us as a group as to why the heck would you want to do this? Does this compromise your ability to actually even submit a paper? If the data is already out there. And at the time, early on, I think there was some concern about that, but that does seem to have disappeared at this point. So I'm not sure. Maybe we should react to questions as opposed to just have me sit here and waffle on, which I can probably do for quite a while. But I'm not sure how productive it is. Does anybody have any thoughts, questions, or what have you?
And Renee can also get us started with some questions that she prepared.
Yeah, there is a comment in the chat that just says that you need to update your preprint when it's published. And I think that It's kind of a sometimes yes, sometimes no. Depending on the preprint server you go to, you can sometimes automatically be updated, but if either of the speakers want to comment on that, if they have any specific.
So yeah, so journals don't want you to necessarily like the update you do your preprint when it's published is just to link it to the published article. But if your article is going through the peer review process, journals don't necessarily want you to update it as it's going through the peer review process because they consider the peer review part of their work product. And so you definitely don't want to like update your preprint with like your response, like basically what you've done to respond to reviewers. You can update your preprint, I think, before you've submitted it to a journal as much as you want. But I think at least my understanding is that once you've submitted to a journal, right, you can't really update it anymore unless you abandon that journal as a submission.
Yeah, I would agree with that. From my experience, the only time that I had to actually link it directly was when the title changed. Otherwise, it was automatic. Otherwise, my other experiences, if the title remains the same, it's automatic. There's another question in the chat, and then we'll go to Alex Palasko. So, how useful are these for grant applications? For example, post-submission materials.
So you can't include preprints as a post-submission material. You can include them in your bioskets upon grant submission. So in order for them to be like included, they have to be pre-printed prior to when you submit the grant.
I guess the other thing is that you can cite them within a grant and people can at least see the data, which can you know allow you to have essentially additional preliminary data hanging around that's in the preprint that people can see, versus taking up page after page after page of your grant
Yeah.
with stuff that's already out there as a preprint. So that's I think a positive.
Yeah, so definitely like pre-submission, great. Post-submission, no.
Alex, do you have a question?
I do. How close or far from, a targeted submission date do you recommend submitting a preprint? It's like you're working on a manuscript and it's like, okay, I think I'm going to submit maybe next month. It's like, oh, is it worth it to even try to do a preprint? Or it's like, I have a hard, I don't have a good gut feeling for when we should be targeting a potential like preprint submission versus just an actual journal submission.
I can tell you what my attitude to that is, and that's we kind of get as close as possible and then stick up the preprint really to put a marker in the sand and say this is, I guess to avoid getting scooped in the year and a half or whatever it's going to take for this thing to go through the process. At least you've said, well, we've done this work already, so and we've got a date on it now. So I would tend not to encourage people to do it too early, but if you're doing a submission next week anyway, having a little marker in the sand that you've done the work, I think is probably a good thing. And it gives you something to cite in the meantime while you're waiting for the painful and not necessarily relevant demands of the reviewers to come in.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think, if you're going to submit it, even in a month, like, it just depends, that you should, I would preprint. We try to preprint most of our things, just because, and also some journals offer scoop protection if you do preprint, and they don't offer scoop protection if you don't, some journals. It is just like in the current publishing environment, it is helpful. It also is a way for your trainees to be able to demonstrate their work and their progress. And so, like, say they're applying for graduate school or they're postdocs applying for, jobs, etc., right? They will be able to actually, or grad students applying for postdocs, etc., they'll be able to demonstrate, like, hey, this is what I did, and we're still waiting for it to get published.
All right, another question. What are the best ways to track down preprint is, do you have experience using a preprint as a data repository for additional figures or tables or raw data, etc.?
No, I haven't done
Well,
that.
so
No.
I was actually thinking about this the other day too. I was thinking about the NIH policy of needing to have all of your data available by the end of your funding period for a grant, for example. So I was kind of thinking on a similar thread, which was, do preprints play a role in that policy?
I don't know. I think like I guess I haven't had an issue with most journals like including all of the supplementary information, or there's other repositories for you to put that on, or sometimes we just use GitHub. It just depends on the nature.
So
I haven't used it, no.
Chris just turned on his camera,
Yeah,
which
so
means
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
that's a
please.
great question. Can you hear me okay?
yeah.
yeah.
To satisfy, for example, a data management and sharing plan, if that's what the question is, that the document that has to be provided with the application to demonstrate how you're going to share the data during or at the completion of the study. Publication in a journal is generally not accepted as a means to do that. It more often it's submitting all of the data to a public repository. So I don't think that preprints really satisfy that, at least not to a high degree. That's just my quick 2 cents, as I understand it.
Right. So, are there any journal limitations on the use of preprints?
I have not ran across it in the journals I submit to, but if anybody has, I would be happy to hear from them. I don't know if Dr. Hayward has, but I have not ran
Not
into that.
not not in the recent past. As I say, years ago when this first started being done in biology, there were a whole bunch of journals that were deeply against it, but they seem to have come around to the idea.
Yeah, and even
I
like
wouldn't say they're a zero because I just don't know, but it's not something I've come up
yeah,
against.
even on bioarchive, like once you submit it to bioarchive, they have a direct submission process to a bunch of journals that have kind of like bought into the idea. And so you can even just like submit directly from bioarchive to like, for example, a lot of the American Society for Microbiology journals, which we publish in, you can directly submit to those. And the same for medRxiv. Each has its own set of journals that allow you to like directly submit after you've submitted to that archive, which is very useful too, I think. But yeah.
Yeah. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I've got a quick question. It's been a long time since I've been in the lab, but a big consideration, at least back then, was alerting your competitors to what you're doing. I mean, there was always this sense of, oh, we've got a whiff that such and such lab is working on this. Let's hurry up and wrap it up and get this paper submitted so we don't get scooped. I mean, this seems like, and again, maybe this is old-fashioned thinking, but it seems like a perfect opportunity to alert your competitors what you're working on and potentially, you know, promote their studies based on what they're reading about you, especially considering that this is prior publication. I mean, it could be put out there as a preprint, and you might have to bounce between 2 or 3 or who knows how many journals before you finally publish it. So it potentially provides competitors a lot of time to sort of catch up, if you will. Is there ever a consideration as far as pros and cons about something like that?
I would have taken the opposite position that you've now put a marker in the sand and said, this is the data that we have. We're working on this. This is an interesting idea. And here is the date, by the way, which is before your publication. So, I would have actually taken it the other way around.
Yeah, I mean, some journals do, as I said, offer preprint protection. So if you have preprinted, they will basically, still basically when you're submitting to them, then they'll like offer the scoop protection. So yeah, I mean, I think maybe it's different considerations, different career stages. So maybe someone who's more early career and might feel more concerned about it than if someone is more established, then they might scare people off more. So yeah, there might be different considerations based on career stage, I think, and so I think that's a fair point.
Indira, do you want to share your comment and then you can ask your question?
Yeah, I just want to echo that. Yeah, it's actually good at multiple levels because when it's pre-printed, that date stamp means that you have put it out there first. And so if they do something that they're not scooping you because your name's already out there. And in many ways, it's an opportunity. And back when Twitter was more active thing in our scientific community, you could have just talked about your preprint. And then if people start downloading, looking at it and discussing it, then, the whole point of publishing work is, of course, peer review, but also peer review and scientific and communicating your results. And this way, you're communicating your results and actually crowdsourcing comments and feedback and everything. And so I think it's all good and a very good thing. And in certain cases, if you just really don't have money to pay for the thousands of dollars for a paper, then this is your way of putting your work out there for review and discussion. So you're actually fulfilling your role to the NIH and to taxpayers, that you're putting the work that you've used their money for out there for them to use. So, and they're widely cited. Like, I mean, I've had papers that are cited as the preprint, but then they don't update it to my actual published paper later, but they'd already seen it, so.
I mean, that updating issue is a real thing because, there's a whole bunch of preprints that sit out there that don't ever get linked to the final published papers. And I mean, I guess if you want to know what's happening, you really kind of have to go and just do a search on the reviewer, on the authors and see what they've actually published at any given point in time. Because, if the title changes or whatever, it can be a big issue. I guess one of the things we didn't talk about is what people think about the journal-specific preprint servers versus the BioRx or the MedRx or whatever. I mean, my inclination is to go with the more general ones because my feeling is that the journal ones kind of suck you into one family of journals, and if you don't get into the journal that you want in that family, are you then condemned to being in the Armenian Journal of Unrepeatable Results, which is like the 19th journal down their list of titles that they own, or what, or do you then have to go back and do the whole freaking process again? So my personal feeling is that the general open ones are probably a better bet, but I'm open to being persuaded that I'm wrong.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Like I have always declined the journal specific preprint options because I don't trust that, it will go, the peer review process will always go. And again, yeah, you just like, because once it's pre-printed with them, like then I think other journals do have policies against like preprints from other families of journals where they don't have policies against the general ones like bioRxiv. But has anyone used one of the journal-specific preprints in the chat or in the meeting? Guess not. Well, if somebody does, please update us on how it goes.
I guess one of the other questions that came up when we were discussing questions, which neither of us really are qualified to talk about, but we'll talk about it anyway, is the use of preprints for purely clinical papers and whether, clinical data that has not been peer reviewed should be a good basis for people making decisions down the road. I mean, it's all very well for us to put a paper about something that happens in mice or cell lines or whatever online and say this looks interesting, but it's a little different if someone's putting up a clinical trial and saying, well, this drug looks interesting, you know, go ahead and shove it at half a dozen patients and see what happens. I guess it's clinical data to my mind is a little more sensitive than the non-clinical stuff here. But again, I don't know what people think about that or feel about it.
Okay, I want to quick ask a question before it gets totally buried in the chat, which was whether methods papers can be published as preprints.
I think so.
I don't see why not.
I'm
I mean, are you going to publish it as a
I'll
method
chime in
paper
because I
anyway?
think so on bioarchive, I believe you cannot actually. I think it's
Oh, okay.
specifically for like full research papers. But we could always go to bioarchive's website and just go to the facts tab. I'm pretty sure that's where I saw that at one
Mm.
point. So like reviews, you also are not supposed to preprint,
Yeah,
at least in
reviews, yeah.
bioarchives. So like I think it's specifically set up for that, but someone can certainly fact check us here.
Maybe our archive, like the super general
That
run.
could be, yes. That could be like the more general one rather than biology preprint.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good question.
Yeah. Okay, Manisha, you have a question.
I do. Hello, everyone. It's good to see everyone. So I have a more general question about the preprint licenses. I don't know if you guys ever debated about which one to choose. So for example, are there certain licenses that might create issues with submission to specific journals later on?
I think
You
that
asked
was,
about copyright?
Yes,
The copyright
Yeah.
question? Okay.
yes.
yeah, I think that was actually in the NIH training. Let's see. Yeah, they actually have a whole session, whole page on the copyrights. And so I think the kind that you generally choose is the one that doesn't allow reuse, because like then, that would be an issue for publication maybe. But yeah, there's actually this whole, I can put the link in the chat. There's a whole page on this in the NIH training.
Okay. Got it. Thanks.
Yeah, let me put this in the chat. Oh, how do I do that? Okay. Everybody. Send to everybody. Mhm.
Do you have a question?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, Chris
Oh,
Benson.
yeah, okay. So I just wanted to take a step back. I mean, we're getting into the details, which is good, and there's more questions, I'm sure, but and just talk about, you know, globally. I was taught that you don't publish your research until it's peer reviewed. And the thing that Simon said about clinical research, I would have the same qualms about basic science research that wasn't rigorous or that wasn't well done. And I think, as Nicole said, there's even papers that are published that aren't necessarily well done. So that's not unique to the preprints. But I wonder about number one, duplication. So what's to stop somebody from submitting a preprint on literally the same thing, but get multiple citations out of it? And then also, are we diluting? I wonder about if we're diluting our science, if we're, you know, non-selectively citing or using the data that's been published to base our next steps on then. And I realize that gets to, how you evaluate and interpret these preprints. So I just wonder if we can take a step back and people can comment on the pros and cons of that.
I think there's a lot of levels to the question you asked. So the first one, it's like, what's to stop someone from duplicating? I think that even happens with public work. Like we've had one of the reviews that we wrote, like one of the first reviews we wrote, it's been highly cited, but it was actually like reproduced in China as like a textbook. And it was so weird. And they even included some of the authors, but they left off all the female authors, including me, and just kept the male. It was so weird. And so they reproduced the entire thing, like, and then they added some random authors, It is weird. So like I feel like that's I don't know. I mean, in this day and age, that's just like what's gonna happen, and there's little we can do about it. But yeah, and then yeah, so that's my answer to that first point. I don't
So,
know
so adding to that, Nicole, it's just a story, but I was a colleague at Vanderbilt when I was there who found that basically an entire chapter of her PhD thesis had been published in China without her knowledge as a paper. So she's like, oh, these are all my graphs and all of my data. And so, yeah, I think in this day and age, we're all open to getting ripped off. The part of Chris's question that I do think is important though is, just trying to review the quality of the data. And I think there is just being, you know, if you want to cite it, then look at it and think about where it's from and think about what they've done and the things that you'd be thinking about if you were peer reviewing it. Stuff gets through peer review that's wrong, and all reviewers are human. I mean, and some are doing a really good job, and some have 97 other things to do before they get home, and it's one more thing on the list. And you can see this from the quality of reviews that you get back on your own papers. So there's definitely more and less thorough reviews out there. So just having gone through peer review is just another layer of screening. But I mean, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be skeptical about those papers as well.
Go ahead and add, Indra.
Oh, just specifically to answer the question you raised about the bioarchive preprints, Chris, they go through a check, and if they're more than X% similar, then they won't post another preprint. So that doesn't mean that someone can't take it and put that in another country, but within bioarchive, nobody can really duplicate that work. Even you can't duplicate your own work because they'll say it's too close to your own old paper. So you can't just like change one paragraph and then put that in again. So
can you take the old one out and put a new one in, and that's okay?
I think
there's an
the old
option
one
to
remains,
update
but
it.
you could say that you have a new version of record or something like that. There is a process, but yeah.
Yeah, you can update it. Yeah, I mean we've done that before.
A revision, yes.
Yeah.
Alexis.
Yeah, I have a question about how one of the strengths of preprints might become a bit of a limitation. So one of the things that was highlighted was that this is a great way to disseminate science that is not behind paywalls, which I think is fabulous because obviously the general public who doesn't have access to really large institutions' library accounts that give you access to a lot of these published articles is a huge problem for, science education and especially for the general public. That being said, especially since the pandemic, there's been an erosion of trust in scientific institutions. And so I do wonder if there may be some harm if there are discrepancies between published preprints and later peer-reviewed manuscripts that scientists understand are a part of the process, but the general public does not. Does anyone have thoughts on like how that could be overcome or the best way to communicate to prevent that?
That's such a great point, Alexis. I don't have any comment or answer, but it's a great point.
It is a
Yeah,
great point.
I was hoping that we would get to this topic. So I want to open the floor to anybody who wants to comment on this, and then also add the concept of not just individuals, but also media being able to access preprint science that's not peer reviewed and running stories on them. So it's all kind of the same topic. And it is a potential danger, so it's interesting. I would be interested also to hear what the speakers and anyone else has to say about this.
But I guess like on the flip side, isn't it good that they can see the scientific process and they can see that like there's a preprint version and then there's a published version and that there were things that were changed, which means that it is being peer reviewed, right? And that we are going through this empirical process of of trying to arrive at what's closest to the truth. I guess I don't know, but maybe that's because I'm too in the weeds about it. But yeah, I don't know. I think it can be viewed as a positive or a negative?
I mean, I sort of agree with that, but it does require that someone's doing their own research a bit diligently rather than sitting on the toilet with their phone in their hand, which seems to be kind of a lot of what you are hearing about.
Yeah, in my own experience, I had kind of the same view where I was hoping that transparency would improve the view of the situation, but a lot of the times it's seen as like being tricked instead of
Yeah.
understanding the process.
You changed your mind, so you must have done something wrong inherently or whatever. Yeah.
I think that just means we need better, like, science communication, right, with the public so they can understand the process, like as Chris said in the chat, that they understand the peer review process. And yeah, I mean, I I think because they can also take something that's been published in a predatory journal, right? And then they can take that at face value, and those are not peer reviewed at all. I mean, the peer review is a joke, right? So what's the difference between, looking at something on a preprint server or looking at something in a predatory journal? People can come to the wrong conclusions both ways. So I guess education's really the answer, right?
Yeah, although, most people don't know the names of their representatives or senators or whatever, I'm not sure how deeply they're going to get educated on the scientific process either, but that's maybe just undue cynicism on their part. Or maybe it's due cynicism.
But Nicole's right. I mean, a lot of us in this chat, in this room here, have said scientists, we miss our opportunities to communicate with the public when we're sitting in our labs. And that's why within the CAIRIBU community, so much of what you all are doing, we're trying to get out to multiple, audiences, and even including talking with patients and getting those dialogues going. Because I think Nicole's right. It's the communication piece, and we need to reclaim that and get science back in the public sphere. And maybe this
And
is a
there
way to
are
do it.
Yeah, and there are huge flags like on NCBI and even on the preprint server's website, like that this is a preprint. This has not been peer reviewed. And we can't guarantee that everybody reads it. But I mean, I think the NIH has tried maybe to combat that a little bit by putting those flags on those papers, like, with an exclamation point, like this is not been peer reviewed. Now, if they don't know what that means, then that's obviously a problem, and that's where we need better science communication. But yeah.
Any other questions on this or comments on this topic? Okay, Hannah Rudin has a comment/question in the chat that says, I haven't personally had the experience where peer review has robustly altered any data in my preprint. Are any of you undergoing a major revision, adding updates to the preprint prior to resubmission?
So we have done that. So we basically, so we had something that we had pre-printed, and then we submitted to a journal, and then we got the first set of reviews back, and they were just like, I didn't want to deal with them because it was just like they didn't get it. So then we submitted it to a different journal because it was just and so in the process of kind of like addressing some things that we thought would improve it. We always sought to improve it. We did update, like, I think a figure, and then we submitted a revision to bioRxiv, and then we submitted that to the new journal, but not to the same journal, if that makes sense.
I'm not sure we've ever updated. I mean, Renee, I guess you can address this because you had a preprint of a paper that ended up coming out in Nature Communications probably about 2 years after it was pre-printed, and there was quite a lot of changes, particularly of like supplementary figures and things that went on with that paper. But I don't know if I assume that the version that's on bioRxiv is still kind of like the original submitted version for that one.
Correct. Yeah. So I've certainly done major revisions of papers from the preprint stage to the publication stage. I do not update the preprint in that, because that in that process you're going specifically with the journal, and you don't necessarily want to adjust your preprint at every revision. That's not necessary. What I did have to do was go back to bioRxiv after publication and say, hey, this has now been published, because they were not able to automatically link it to the final publication due to the significant adjustments, including a title change. Does Bob Moreland want to unmute and comment? He's made a few comments throughout, and Praveen has kind of dittoed the poster, the poster comment. So do you want to just mention that to the group?
Sure. I back in the old days before there were preprints in biological science, we'd go to meetings and we'd present posters, and it would be interim data or it would be our work as we were getting it ready for publication. And I think that's a way of thinking of this. There is a caution that once you put it out as a preprint, getting rid of that, sometimes they'll tell you that is a permanent record. So definitely be sure the updated citation is in the preprint so it goes forward. PubMed does that, but I think thinking about it like a poster is, for us old fogies, that works.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Because it is. It's the stage of our data at that moment, and it's going to be adjusted probably during peer review.
I think also, in a way, it helps advance the science. If you have to wait 2 years for it to come out, it could have been so much more useful, just like presenting that poster at a
Correct.
meeting. And hopefully that's what we're here for, avoiding the sharks of predatory journals and AI.
Yeah. Any other questions or any comments or questions that I missed? I have one more topic that I don't think we mentioned at all, which is if your manuscripts contain big data, for example, require a geo accession number, for example, do those data have to be available when you preprint?
So technically, no. bioRxiv will accept things before the data, and people often embargo that data until it's been published by a peer-reviewed journal for reasons of not being scooped. Because that's when someone could actually take your data and reanalyze it and then publish it. So yeah, I know it's not like in the, theme of open science, but we generally don't include those big data sets if they're not already released on a preprint. If it's something that's already released, then we would, but if it's something we have embargoed, then we don't. Also, it can take a really long time, especially now. Like we've been experiencing significant issues depositing stuff on NIH databases. Like it's been crazy trying to get things deposited on, like genomes and data. It's been difficult actually. So I don't know. But I think maybe there are diverse opinions on this subject.
Chris Preston, go ahead.
I like what you said, Nicole, and picking up on Bob's comment too. You know, if your data isn't there in the preprint, that could encourage someone to contact you. And that's what we want, right? Is discourse among scientists. I mean, we all get too many emails, but yet still it's a way, like Bob said, of encouraging that discussion that normally happens at a poster or at an abstract session at a meeting. So I'm thinking of that differently now than I did before based on your comments. I think that's a strength.
Yeah, and when someone has personally contacted me for the data, like especially if I know of them, then I will give it to them, right? It's just like out there for the AI to like, go crazy with or whatever I get worried about.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're putting a link in and the data's embargoed anyway, then it's not necessarily that useful to include it in the preprint, I guess.
Great. Had some great discussion here, I think. Always food for thought.
I'm still thinking about what Bob just said. Is it the idea of treating these as posters, and it's actually it's an appealing concept because it sort of describes very well where we are.
Like
It's
a
also sad that we're not traveling anything like as much as we used to for meetings. We're not meeting face to face anything like as much as we used to.
like a big virtual poster hall in a way.
Yes. Yeah, I mean the downside, of course, is that you're not standing there really interacting with the person who's coming by.
Yeah, but like you said, even Chris, like it's somebody can see that and reach out to you, and it could foster a new collaboration, conversation, whatever. Um, Although, in my experience, there's not been much feedback from preprints. I have not. I don't know about other people's experiences, but I don't think it's been used very much that way by.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually had editors like email me after we submitted a preprint inviting us to submit to their journal. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's just like,
Editors of journals that you've heard of, or editors
yeah,
of
it was Nature
okay.
Communications. Yeah. Yeah. So, but yeah, no, it was like legit journal. Not like a predatory journal, but yeah, I think that comes down to how you can advertise it, which I think we've been like crippled a lot because we used to just do these things on Twitter a lot, and so now just getting your preprints out there is harder. We do like we put ours on Blue Sky. But again, there's not as much engagement. There's some issues with that platform. I feel like nobody sees my posts. But yeah, so I think yeah, the issue is getting it out there so that you can get feedback. And I don't know how we can improve that.
Well, I'll just point out that the CAIRIBU Interactions Core staff does, she's on this call, I think, Anna, every month goes through all of you that are affiliated with the CAIRIBU community. And it's a pretty broad net that we cast and identifies your publications, including those that are preprints. And then we post them on the website. And we have this CAIRIBU Compass, which is kind of like an e-journal where we would welcome you to submit something and we'll put it in that e-journal as just one more way of getting the word out there. So we'd like to be part of that solution. In addition to Blue Sky and other places where you post it, send it to us and we'll figure out what to do with it.
That's perfect. Thank you. Any other final comments?
Good luck with all of your preprints and good luck with your reviewers, I guess.
There is one more comment. Hannah said, could we do a CAIRIBU LinkedIn platform for sharing preprints?
Let's, Mariana, Theo, let's put that on our list.
Well, thank you all so much for attending. We had some great conversation, and the CAIRIBU Interactions Core will always keep us apprised of what's happening. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, everybody.
All righty. Thank you.